So in the interim between last week's class and this week's class, I did get a question. And so I'm going to ask it to you, and then we'll kind of deal with that a little bit. So the first thing is, how many of you have small children? Okay. All right, small children. Okay, so I've got non-ambulatory, curtain climbers, rugrats, squeakers, and teens. That's how I always categorized young people when I was a youth minister. Then you don't have to worry about, is it middle school, is it high school, is it junior high? You were either non-ambulatory, you drop them and they stay there, or you had curtain climbers, they kind of toddle around and grab stuff, and then rugrats. And then squeakers are the teenagers who have high-pitched voices every now and then. And then you had the teenagers. So how many of you have small, non-ambulatory kids? You know, still babies in a basket. All right, none of that. How many have you rugrats and curtain climbers? All right. How many middle schoolers, squeakers, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th graders? All right. And then how about high schoolers? Good deal. So the question was, how do you balance kids and spouse? You know, can you edit this at all? Where's he at? We were traveling with the guys who do the skits from CYC, and I used to watch The Equalizer, and I like that. Well, now they've done this Equalizer with this female, and I'm again that. I don't like, is it Queen Latifah? I don't, that's just, she can't pull that role off. She's not the Equalizer. It's uncool. Well, we're standing in, I think we were in Buc-ee's on the way back from Texas with the SWAT guys. And Travis or Ben, one of the other goes, the Equalizer? I said, well, if it's Queen Latifah on a seesaw, that's not going to be an Equalizer. And they made me go sit in the van. But anyway, so how do you balance spouses and kids? And the first comment off the floor was, not well. And so that was the question that was asked me. Said, hey, would you talk a little bit in the marriage class about how to deal with this thing of, hey, we've produced offspring. We've got other humans in the house, and we've got to help them live. So give me some advice. Tell me what you're doing. We've got an adult daughter, for those of you who don't know our history, and I realize that having only one child is like having a glorified pet. I mean, I know I didn't do real parenting. It was just a really more intelligent pet that you know. So what does that look like? Have you seen marriages have trouble because of an investment into the children? I get some head nods. So, okay, so Ben says an over-investment into the children. Would you like to clarify that more? Yeah, so the first thing, and we're going to go to Parenting 101, is that your job is to raise your children to be self-reliant and leave home. Okay? That's your mission. And if they don't, somebody did something wrong. All right? And so your job is not to make your children happy. It's to make them independent. And I do a series of seminars that got a lot of traction in a thing that I do called Raising Spiritually Self-Reliant Children, based on Stephen Glenn's book, Raising Self-Reliant Children in a Self-Indulgent World. Just quote Tommy Caldwell, world-famous climber. He said, my dad's philosophy was to prepare his children for the path, not prepare the path for your children. So you've heard of helicopter parents? Well, there's lawnmower parents where they mow all the tall grass so their kids can walk through. So I like, lawnmower parents and helicopter parents. So that's the biggest problem is if you don't understand that your mission is to invest in your children but not over-invest in your children. And there's lots of ways to test your parenting styles and ask how compatible. If you read the book, Raising Self-Reliant Children in a Self-Indulgent World, it talks about builders and barriers. It talks about the things that we do that build self-esteem and build self-reliance, and then there's things that create barriers. There's also a test called an EPAC test. I think it's expectations and perceptions of autonomy and control, EPAC, E-P-A-C. So if you could picture on a board, you have permissiveness, and then you have control, and then you have hostility, and you have love. And you make that into 4 quadrants. You get one of these semantic maps. So you have parents who parent with hostile permissiveness. I don't care what you do, leave me alone. Bring me another beer and get out in front of the TV. Okay? That's hostile permissiveness. I'm going to let you do anything you want to, and it's because I don't love you and I'm not invested in you and I'm sorry you're here. I just want you out, out, out. Okay? Or you have parents who parent with hostile control. The over-intimidation, micromanaging. I'm punitive and vindictive in the way I discipline. And discipline doesn't involve being punitive or vindictive. I've got a rule. If you break the rule, there's a penalty to pay for the rule. It's not because I'm mad. It's not because I'm angry. It's not because I'm upset. It's just this equals this. It's not punitive or vindictive. And when you start doing things that are punitive or vindictive, you're either immature, selfish, or manipulative. Because if I think I do this to you and you'll do that, well, I'm manipulating you. My limits and my boundaries have nothing to do with what I expect you to do. My limits and my boundaries are controlling my responses to your behavior. That way you don't have the ability to press my buttons. But parents who parent with hostile control often are reactionary, and they threaten and they intimidate, that kind of stuff. Then you have parents who parent with permissive love. And they don't ever want their kids to be unhappy. They don't want them to be upset. They don't want them to fail. They want to make sure they're not traumatized. And so they almost go out of their way to make sure that their kids never experience any adversity. And I'm a very strong proponent of intentional adversity. You set some things up in your own life to do things and make you tougher, to make you more resilient. And I think sometimes you do that for your kids. Just because you have the ability to pay for your kids' college doesn't mean maybe that you should. It may be that you let them go to college and let them get in debt and then pay it off later. Because it's good to eat ramen noodles and have to decide, are we going to rent a movie or buy a pizza? It's good to make choices like that because it builds your character. That's a personal philosophy of mine. And then you have parents who parent with loving control. Now, the loving control group, they're going to make sure that you make all A's. And they're going to make sure that you're first chair playing the trombone. And they're going to write your Lads to Leaders speech for you. And they're going to coach you and all this stuff. And if you're not the pitcher, they're going to go down to the school and talk to that coach. And by golly, you'll be the guy on the mound because I'm the president of the quarterback club. Pardon? There's folks in jail for that right now. We've been reminded of. So of those 4 parenting styles, hostile permissiveness, hostile control, permissive love, and controlling love. What do you see as the inherent problems in those type of parenting styles? The kids who kill themselves are the kids in this bottom line right here. The all-A, all-American, I'm going to be the best of the best, and I'm going to reflect my parents. And they grow up with the idea that it's not I can't be good, I just can't be good enough. The number 3 killer of kids in America is kids. Sometimes that goes as high as the second highest killer of kids is kids. And it's not the kids who are out here despondent on crack. It's the kids who go, you know what, I've made all A's all my life. I've started every sport I ever played in, and my dad still doesn't think I'm good enough. And they just quit, and literally quit the planet. A lot of your extreme sexual behavior comes out of this crowd of kids, especially if you talk about the far right-wing group of religious groups who are hyper-reactive to modesty or sexuality or stuff like that. It's a scary statistic, and that's based on anecdotal wisdom, 25 years in private practice, and about 40 years as a minister. When I run into kids who are the wheels in the ditch with gender or sexual orientation, addicted to pornography, you'll find it comes from the far right wing of our fellowship and the far right wing of most fellowships. Look at the Islamic faiths. Look at the Amish. Look at the Catholic priest. You'll find that same thing is phenomenological because of this over-controlling, hyper, parents from this group will have kids in trouble, and they're more concerned about keeping it secret than getting their kids therapy. They're not worried about their kids going to hell. They're worried about their kids embarrassing them in church. Okay? The group of the permissive love, there's some inherent things because you're going to have a conflict over discipline. Either mom doesn't like dad's version of it or dad doesn't like mom's version of it, and so there's this constant power struggle. And kids are smart enough to know if I can divide and conquer, I win. So I can pit mom against dad or dad against mom, and dad's a bully, mom's a bully, whatever. That category will create it. The other side of the chart, those are dysfunctional people anyway. So I don't think their parenting style really ruins their marriage. Your marriage is already ruined because you're married to either a narcissist or a bully anyway. So I don't worry about that. But on this side of that chart, you have those inherent problems where the parents have over-invested, and I like when Ben said that, they over-invested into the children. Your job is to raise a spiritually self-reliant, mature adult. And there's some things that you don't have to solve for them. I go back to the story of Jethro and his 7 daughters, and they go to the well, and what happens every time they take their sheep to the well? This is how Moses meets his wife, by the way. He comes out of the wilderness, he's hiding, he goes to Midian, and the priest of Midian has 7 daughters, and the 7 daughters bring the sheep to the well. And what happens at the well every day? Okay, what happened at the well that day? Who came? What happened? The other shepherds came and mugged them. Okay, bugged them. Okay, yeah. So what these girls are doing, they're bringing their sheep out of the wilderness, and sheep won't stick their head in a bucket to drink. My cup runneth over. That's there for a reason. Sheep won't drink out of a creek that's making too much noise because they're paranoid little animals. Sheep are the nature's Meals on Wheels. Okay, everything that eats sheep. They can't defend themselves. All right. So in order to get the sheep to get water, you've got to dip this bucket into the well. Water weighs 8 pounds per gallon. And if you've ever straight pulled, a 5-gallon bucket of water up, and you pour it in this little low trough, and then the sheep line up and they drink the little water and they go home and do whatever sheep do at home. Well, these shepherds know that these girls come to the well every day. Well, these girls come to the well and they let them pull the water out, and then they scatter their flock and let their sheep drink the water. And then they leave, and the girls have to gather their flock, and then they have to rewater their sheep. And it probably happens several days a week, if not every day, because on this occasion, when the shepherds come out and start, Moses runs them off. And the girls get home earlier, and Dad says, "What are you doing home so early today?" Which makes me think that several days a week, the girls come in. "Why are you girls late?" "The shepherds?" "Yeah, the shepherds again." You notice there's this perpetual problem of the bully shepherds at the well. And what is the priest of Midian's response to this? There's not a long post on Facebook. If you're taking other people's water and chasing other people's sheep, you're not kind. There's no nasty gram. There's no Snapchats. There's no, "Have you seen this shepherd?" Hey, life's a contact sport, and it's not fair. I'm going to die one day, and you girls are going to have to live with these shepherds. They live next door. And that's it. He doesn't leave the other stuff he's doing at the house and go out here and stand by the well with his arms crossed waiting to whip a bunch of shepherds. And you think, "Oh, wow, what a barbarian. What is it to live with a savage?" Well, what good do you do if you go out and you run the shepherds off? And then you die. What will happen? The shepherds will come back. And so hey, this is a situation I'm in. I didn't cause it. I can't cure it. How do I cope with it? And they learn to cope with it. It's not fair. It's adverse. Life's a contact sport. So there's one example of parenting that we would definitely say that's not over-involved. We might even think it's under-involved. What do you know about David and Absalom? What's that? Not a healthy relationship. You've got this kid, and for all practical purposes, he's beautiful. Okay, he got long flowing hair, and he kills his half-brother because his half-brother raped their half-sister. And so David banishes him from the kingdom. And then Joab and this woman work on this deal to get Absalom allowed back to the kingdom. And David's a sucker for a metaphorical story. You know, as like milk spilled on the ground, you can't gather your days up, and you've got this person who's banished their son, and David's a sucker for this stuff. David will jump. That shouldn't happen. Well, you're doing it. Again, you know, he gets caught every time on this stuff. You know, David's like, you know. And so they bring Absalom back to the kingdom, but he's not allowed in the palace. So is he on restriction or is he not on restriction? Hey, you're restricted, but you can drive to work, you can drive to baseball practice, and you can go on the youth retreat because we don't want to keep our kids away from church stuff. Well, if that's restriction, sign me up. I don't have to do the stuff I don't want to do. You know, go to your room. That's climate controlled. You have a PS4. Nobody bugs you, and you listen to your music as loud as you want. Great, please, somebody restrict me now. Send me to my room and let me play. And so Absalom has this thing where he's banished, but he's not banished. And then while he's sitting there in front of the gate, he's hugging people, he's shaking their hands, and going, you know, if I were the king, this is how I deal with your case. And he subverses his way into a position that he makes a run at the kingdom. He takes over the citadel in Jerusalem and sleeps with the concubines on top of the roof in public view. And what's David's response to this kid? He leaves the palace barefooted and weeping and going down the path on the brook Kidron. And as he's going out the brook Kidron, some guy that doesn't like him anyway is throwing rocks at him. And one of David's lieutenants says, would you like me to bring you his head? That's the way David and his friends solved problems. They were brutal men. David's theme song, Saul has slain his thousands, David has slain. It's not nothing for David to kill a man. Okay, so this guy's throwing rocks at him, and his lieutenant, hey, you want me to go stop that? You know, not the king wishes that you would. And David puts his head, I'm sorry, Mr. King, you know, and makes a head puppet out of it. Well, you've got this kid, Absalom, who's sleeping with the concubines, who's taken over the kingdom, and instead of David going in there taking his head, he's barefoot and weeping and leaving his own home. And then they get this war council together, and one of the guys says, look, David's like a wounded bear, and he's in a pit or a hole. And if you go out there in the dark looking for him, you'll find him. And it'll be on his terms, and it'll frighten everybody to death. You think about a guy that was skilled in nighttime warfare. There's a phrase in the Song of Solomon. Here comes King Solomon with his 60 warriors, and it either says trained in the art of fighting at night or unafraid of the terrors of the night. We take it for granted we can go out here in the dark with a flashlight. I was out till 11:30 last night. We were chasing a kidnapper, and he threw a cell phone down. And the evidence that we needed was on this cell phone. So, yeah, your local SWAT team played Hands Across America. And we were walking through neighborhoods and climbing fences and looking for a cell phone. But I've got a flashlight that'll roll a cat. They said, hey, if you go in the dark after David, he's in a pit somewhere, he's in a cave, you'll find him. And you don't want what you find. So they back off. And it gives David time to put his army together and respond to this. And I'm so sorry. And as he sends his army out, what instruction does he give his generals? Deal gently with the young man Absalom. Now, I'm either going to war or I'm not going to war. Which is it? Rules of engagement. You know, once we're fighting, we're fighting. But his response was, hey, you go out here and you go to war, but if you run into this young man Absalom, you deal with him gently. What happens to Absalom? He gets him curly locks tangled in an oak tree, and somebody says, hey, I saw Absalom hanging in a tree, and Joab says, show me where. And Joab, and depending on how you read it, it's 3 darts or 3 javelins. Absalom runs into this kid and says, you know, the king ain't got the backbone to deal with you, but I do. And it's a done deal. Absalom would have been saved that fate had David put some limits and consequences on him. You know, I often compare that story to the story of the prodigal son. The prodigal son ends up in a pig pen. A Jewish kid living with pigs wishing he could eat pig groceries. Well, that's a flip of the coin moment. He may look at this and go, man, my father's such an unreasonable dude, and I've run out of money, and he won't come rescue me. I hate him more. Or you go, hey, I disobeyed my father's rule. I spent all my father's resources, and here I am living with the pigs. I think I'll go home and ask to be a slave. You let the consequences of a child's behavior end up in pig pen, and it's a 50-50 chance what they do. You don't put adequate limits on a child, 100% guaranteed he will run into someone named Joab. I've seen it play out too many times. You might disobey your parents. You might disobey the law. If you offend and disrespect your drug dealers, they will kill you. If you end up in prison and you disrespect the leader of the gang, they will kill you. If you don't obey a police officer when he says put your hands in there and turn around, and you make a furtive movement and threaten their life, you could get killed. The pig pen moment is a 50-50 chance. The Absalom moment with Joab, I believe, is a guarantee. So when we start talking about, how do we get involved with our children, and if you take this EPAC chart and you do the permissive and the hostile and the control and the love, if you drew a little pie from the center of the chart between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock, that's a thin piece of pie where they could not predict any adverse behavior. You could take that chart and go, hey, this kid said my parents parented this way, and they were permissive love. You can predict with 68% accuracy the ones that will smoke marijuana. So when the hippies had babies, I just want everybody to be happy and have love. On the bottom part of that chart, on the loving control with a little bit of hostility, you can predict cocaine and hallucinogens and joining cults and sexual promiscuity. You get up here on the high end of the hostile permissiveness, and it's kids who hack paint and do LSD. It's not causation, but it's correlation. But in the side of the chart that says permissiveness with control and love, there's a slice of the pie between like 2 and 4, and there's no instances of at-risk behavior. Fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. Don't be hostile, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. So it's loving control with consequences for independence with the absence of hostility produces those 0 effects on that EPAC test. And that's not a biblically based test. That's just a random chart that this guy did trying to learn about capabilities. So as Ben said, it's not just about involvement with your kids, but it's over-involvement with your kids. So how do you balance that? What are some guidelines that you think are valid for that? So the first thing is there's some intentional thinking. One of my buddies was about to empty nest. He had 3 children. I said, hey, you're about to be by yourself. He said, we started out by ourselves. And we got married, and the only reason we're having kids is because we got married, and what was our promise? I'm going to put you first, forsaking all others. And in the same way in the marriage, we talk about a man will leave his father and his mother and cleave to his wife, and the two will become one. I think that trickles down to, hey, there's a certain expectation that the kids don't interfere with this either. The children are part of your world. You don't become a part of their world. Okay? So they don't have to play 15 sports. They don't have to be in every club. They can play one season of ball. They don't have to play year-round ball. You get to make some choices and say, hey, this would be nice, but it interferes with us. And us comes first. Jackie comes before my mom and dad. Jackie comes before my brother. Jackie comes before my career. Jackie comes before Lonnie Beth. And if you don't do that intentionally, what happens is one of the parents is over-involved and the other parent feels left out. And so there's this divergence where you don't do this intentional, making time to be a couple again. And then when the kids leave home, you got 2 strangers that live in the same house, and one of the things that kept them together was just the transit schedule. And now that transit schedule doesn't exist, and you don't know who you're married to, and you don't have a friendship anymore. So the first thing is, if I'm going to balance my relationship with my kids and my spouse, I've got to have some rules of engagement that say, hey, my spouse comes first. The two become one flesh. And that's not just about sexual intimacy, although that does include sexual intimacy, but family before career, spouse before children, and family before friends is kind of the hierarchy that you put that in. And so if you're not intentionally saying, you know what, I know that, and there's a place when you have kids, the preambulatory and the curtain climber rugrat stage, when they require an absolute commitment of time. And if you've got any selfishness left after you've been married a few years, you got to pour that down the drain when your kids come. You can't be selfish and be a parent. Not of little bitty kids. Because there's some things there that have immediate consequences and immediate concerns, and the developmental years between 0 and 5 create who that person's going to be. The implicit beliefs they get about their worth, their value, their ability to control life, that comes in those early years. And those of you who have small children go, I can see this kid's personality already. It's scary, isn't it? How quickly you see that little personality. And, you know, we've had people coming over playing with our dogs. And it's very interesting that there are some people who are just super, super timid and gentle. And they maybe think about touching a puppy. And then there's those people like, let's wrestle the puppies. Ah! You know? And it's like, how do two kids from the same culture end up so vastly different? Well, some of it's genetics, some of it's parenting, some of it's just the way they're wired. And so you've got these little people for a certain amount of time when you are the major influence in their life. And so they do require your involvement, they do require your attention, but it's always got to be with the idea that my number one slice of my pie goes to my spouse. Now, it may be difficult to say, hey, we're going to get up an hour before the kids do and spend us time. Or we're going to put the kids to bed and spend another hour up having just us time. It may be that you say, hey, it makes me nervous to ask somebody to keep our kids so we can go out and have a date. And you know, if you're living in a town and you don't have immediate family members, I recognize that can be a struggle. That's one of the things we deal with the cops a lot, is the guys that work second and third shift don't have reliable child care, and because they're cops, they're paranoid, so they won't leave their kids with just anybody. And that's one of the things we're trying to do with our peer support, is find some kind of way to provide some trustworthy, if not regular, but emergency child care, so these cops can say, hey, you know, I can leave my kids at an overnight place while I go patrol the streets between 2:30 and 6:30 and know my kids are okay. Because you don't want to be walking around the streets of Huntsville between 2:30 and 6:30 worried in the back of your mind about your kids. You got to concentrate on that thing you're doing there. And so that's, the cops deal with that all the time. Well, a lot of people go, hey, I don't have any family in town and I can't leave my kids. And so I talked to a couple just last week, and it's been 7 years since they've gone anywhere or done anything without their children. Now, I was seeing them in therapy because their marriage is in trouble. And so the thing is, you got to be involved with your kids, but you can't be over-involved. So what do you do for healthy, proper involvement with your kids? Okay, a lot of times it's just involving them in your life rather than you being involved in their life. So husband and wife parent together. Husband and wife take them on things together. Jackie and I carved out a lot of time with Lonnie Beth in her volleyball years because we would be involved in taking her to practice, and then, you know, when we were persona non grata at practice, like all good coaches are, you say, hey, parents, we're glad you're here, leave. And so we'd go for a walk while she was practicing, or we'd go get a snack while she was practicing. It was never, I'm taking her to volleyball and you go. But again, we only had one, so we didn't have the chaos other people have. But parent together, is that kind of what you meant, or did you? Oh, okay. good stuff. Let's all pull dandelions. That's wonderful. So part of Stephen Glenn's book in raising self-reliant children in a self-indulgent world is children have to have 3 perceptions. I'm capable, I'm significant, and I have the ability to affect my outcomes. I can influence my life. Well, when I decide, hey, it's time to mow the lawn or trim the hedges or fold the laundry, you work alongside your kids. Not only are you spending some family time, but you're also spending some time that says, hey, I'm teaching you that you're capable and you can do that. So I like that as a good idea, being involved. By the way, 75% of our kids between 13 and 25 leave the church. 80% of the 75 who leave the church come back to church in their mid-20s if they have one thing in common. If they were involved with their parents in one aspect of church work. And that could be putting visitors cards in the back of the pews. It could be cleaning the communion trays after church. It could be coming over for a work day or Monday night for the master or anything. If your children work with you in church, and even if they leave church, they return later because they've been involved in something that was familial. That's a pretty interesting statistic. So it's basically going to boil down to, and this is overdone, and I admit that. How much room do you have in your relationship with your spouse for a third party? How many people from work can they bring home and say, hey, we're going to spend a lot of time with Bob here. He's got a boat. That kind of stuff. We talked about the inverse in intimacy, where you spend too much time with a third party. Well, could your children be viewed as a third party? So there's a healthy involvement with your children, and then there's an unhealthy involvement with the children. And so protecting your family while you have young children is learning about the things that have immediate needs and then the things that are perceived needs. And that's when I think we get involved in overindulging or overspending or being over-involved in some things where, you have the ability to say, you know what, this is not something you have to do to be successful. This is not something you have to do to be happy. And if your involvement with soccer or basketball or volleyball or lacrosse or underwater basket weaving or dance team or whatever it is, if it creates family stress, why are you doing it? If it creates friction, hassle, or hostility, is it a good thing? My brother says, I'm not a member of a deer club this year. He said, by the time I get up at 3 o'clock to drive to Georgiana to hunt and then come back and I'm not home till 10:30, he said, something in my mind now, that's just not fun anymore. I said, well, if it's not fun, it's not a hobby. If it's not fun, it's called a job, typically speaking. All right? And so there's some things you've got to ask, hey, why are we doing this with our kids? And if it's creating hassle, if it's creating stress, and if it's creating conflict, it may be one of those things you can say, we don't have to do it at this level. Does that sound too barbaric or too practical? So what's the purpose of this? I talk a lot of times about quality time. I don't believe in quality time, by the way. I believe that time in and of itself is qualitative. Now, you've got to ask yourself, and I told my brother this. My brother's older than me, but didn't get married till he was 39. So he had his first child at around age 42. I'm already kind of gearing up into grandparent mode. And he's got, minions and rugrats. And he's going to teach his kids to hunt. I said, well, now you've got to make a decision. Are you hunting or are you taking your kids hunting? Because you can't do both. Because if you think my children are going to go hunting with me, you're going to be frustrated because they're not going to sit still, they're not going to be quiet, and they're going to want to go home in 45 minutes. But if you decide, hey, I'm taking my kids to the woods, and we're going to have as much fun as we can, and we'll leave when we need to, they'll learn to love the woods. Anybody was ever taken fishing with your dad, and he made you stay 4 hours? And we're going to have a good time. Dad, I'm miserable. The bugs are biting me. There's a turtle here, there's a snake here, and the fish aren't biting, The only thing biting are the bugs. Well, we're fishing. Well, no, you ruined a kid's experience with the outdoors. Gunner and I went camping. We lasted till the Oreos ran out. And then we came back inside. We went hunting, and we lasted till the hot chocolate ran out. Deer start walking between 4:30 and 5:05. That's what we call the witching hour. At 4:45, he goes, Papa Jonesy, I'm ready to go home. I said, cool, let's go home. And we got out and started walking home. There's a possum. You want to shoot it? No, you shoot it. Okay. The possum did not have a great day, but heck, me and Gunner and Hot Chocolate did, you know. Rowan was upset because she didn't hunt. Well, she's bought camouflage, and she's going hunting next time we come. That'll be a dumpster fire, you know, because she'll be dancing in the blinds, you know, and it's like, oh, wow. But you got to decide, are you hunting or taking your kids hunting? Because you're really not doing both. And so am I doing this for me, or am I doing this for you? My famous ninja sword story. I have a little short ninja sword that we used on the ropes course. And we're not doing the ropes course anymore, so I've got this ninja sword. I thought, Gunner will enjoy that. He'd been beating on my punching bag at home with it anyway. So I put it in a package and get ready to send it. I thought, you know, this is a bad deal because Sissy Bear ain't got a ninja sword. So I called Lonnie Beth. I said, hey, I'm sending Gunner a sword. Do I need to send Rowan a sword? And she said, just send her some lip gloss. I said, what? You have failed as a parent. If my granddaughter had rather have lip gloss than a ninja sword. And Lonnie Beth said, Dad, do you want her to have what she wants, or do you want her to have what you want her to want? That's some straight up Yoda level wisdom right there, son. I want her to have what she wants, not what I want her to want. So Gunner got a sword and she got lip gloss. Well, when you start parenting your kids, do they enjoy wrestling, baseball, football, soccer? Do they enjoy staying home? Do they enjoy music or gymnastics, or do they enjoy staying home? And I think it's okay to say, hey, we're doing this for you, not for me. And I think that would balance a lot of this overbalance of 900 sports and having a schedule that's busier than mine on travel and stuff like that. As long as the intention is I'm putting my spouse first, and my spouse and I are putting the appropriate level of attention on our kids, I think that's how you achieve that balance. Anybody want to add anything else to that? Read one quick verse. I know it's haven't been very biblical tonight. It's been more opinion driven. But in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 11, Paul says this. He says, you are witnesses, and so is God, how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father does with his own children. We encouraged, we comforted, and we urged you to live lives worthy of God who calls you into his kingdom and glory. If your job as a parent is to encourage, comfort, and urge, encourage is facilitate capabilities, comfort is respond to their crisis, and urge is to discipline them properly. But those three things operate under the context of, I'm going to urge you to live lives worthy of God. 3 John 3, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in the truth. He didn't say I have no greater joy than to brag about my kids' ATC score or ACT score or their GPA or their median income or their scholarship to Princeton. He said I have no greater joy than to hear that my kids walk in the truth. And so if your job as parents is get my family to heaven, then family going to heaven is proper balance on husband and wife, proper balance on the children, and then everything else that you choose to do, sports, recreation, hunting, fishing, clubs, involvement, that'll all take care of itself because the priorities are already properly balanced from the top down. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for asking that question last week, and so we got one more week. If you want to ask a question, send me an email or a text, and we'll try to deal with it. Otherwise, I'll put a bow on our class, and we'll go from there. Thank you guys very much.